Hey guys, Joseph here from Joe Concepts. Um, let's just quickly get to what we have for today. So in the previous tutorials in this series, we've been looking at texture shaders, how to create different texture shaders. So here we're going to be looking at how to create basic fabric, and then let's just see how to go about it. But before I get into this tutorial, I would like to tell you to please like this tutorial if you find it helpful, and you should share it because I do this and it helps me in YouTube algorithm. And if you are new to my channel, please do subscribe because I do tutorials like this every time. So let's just get into the tutorial. All right, so before I even start anything, I would like to implore you. I did a tutorial past in previous times and where I created fabric texture with with traditional cinema 4D texture. So this is just basically how to do that. Just if you understand how I did that, then you would understand how I'm going to go about this. Just making use of Redshift, still the same principle, the same process. Just how to apply the Redshift shader to that. So this is what I have. I have my geometry here. So then, because I'm going to be creating a fabric, I've already done some simulation for my cloth. So I have my short cloth and my long cloth. So I'm going to make use of this long cloth to do this simulation. So because I want speed, I know that this cloth is going to be covering up. So let me just quickly do some housekeeping so that I'm going to have a fast review. So I'm going to hide this because the cloth would have covered this and even this top. I know that the clothes would have covered all these things. So sorry about that. Then I think these ones the clips also would go because I don't want to have to start calculating for all these things. Just hold down Alt to clip that off. I think this two won't show here. Okay, all right, I think it's only going to show up to this place. So let me just quickly cross check. All right, so you can see, so this is what we're going to have. So the next thing is I'm going to create a basic Redshift texture and put that texture onto the cloth material. Then we're going to start setting up every other thing that we have. Okay, moving this. So if we come here, I will just drag this over to this guy. So I'll just call this cloth. All right, so if you don't have Redshift, I'm going to put a link in the description or just check the card up here to learn how to use Cinema 4D texture to create similar thing that I'm going to do here. So for this, I'm going to bring down the reflection. That's the first thing because I do not want reflection. If I'm to check this now, I'm going to have this cloth objects being overly reflective and we don't want that. So sorry, I need to bring it up. So we don't need this. So I'm going to bring down the reflection. So this is what I have. So another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to increase a little bit of this roughness, just bring it up a little bit. Then we can start working with the texture. So I have a texture that I'm going to plug into this. So basically you must have downloaded your texture maps that you're going to be using. So I have some texture maps here that I'm going to check. So let's look at this first, then I'm going to switch with the other. So I have basic, so by the way I downloaded this texture online, so you could just search. We have different texture websites, texture3D textures.com, sketch textures and all that. So you could just, I think I'm still going to put a link in the description so you could search. You have some free textures online that you can work with. So I'm going to bring in the diffuse, the bump. I really don't need the bump. Just the diffuse and the normal is enough for me. So I'll just work with these two. and drag into this place. So this is for the first one. So you will see by the time I'm switching to the other one, you will. So I'm just going to use this to do the normal basic thing. And so I'm going to plug this into my diffuse. Of all the tutorials I've been doing in this series, this is the simplest of all. So just have this diffuse. So let's quickly work on the scale of this guy here. So if we come in, because this object is a planar object, so I'll just make use of user scale, scalar user data, so I'll drag this into the scale section. So I'm going to have this because the scale is 0. So I type 1, takes me back to the default. So increasing the value reduce the texture size. So I think this is fine. Let's try to see 3. I think I'll work with that. 2.5 to which one, I think. So it depends on you anyway. So it depends on what you want, the feel you're looking at. So I think I will go with these two. So if you want to reduce this scale, you could just increase the value and it reduces and all that. So just go with 2. And so now the reason why I'm doing this is by the time I'm putting all this other texture, I need to make sure that the scale are uniform, else I'm going to have issues. So let me just bring in the bump. So if I bring in the bump map, I can drag this into the input and put the bump into the bump section. So just click, drag into the overall bump input. So we're going to have this showing us here. So if we bring this bump down to 0, we don't get to have anything. So you remember this texture scale is normal texture. So I'm going to change this from the height. I'm going to change the input map type from the height field to tangent space normal. So it gives me a better representation because of the kind of input type that we're having. So basically all you need to do is the more you want this to be pronounced, the higher the value. So if I bring this to 10, for instance, starts getting too high, the height start getting too high that you start to have all these blackness and all that. So mind you, for your bump and your normal, they are not actual displacement, they are just a way of representing displacement. Because if you look at the edge here, you don't get to have any displacement here. So I think I'll just bring this back to 1 thereabout. And then we also need to, like I said, we need to bring this back over to, so what we will do is I'm going to plug out this color so that we see the impact of only the bump. So you see this bump. So if I start changing this value, if I make this 3, you see the intensity of the bump. I think 1 is fine in this case. We can see the bump a little bit. Then we can also bring in the scale over to this. So if I drag the scale, because we need to be uniform. So we bring this to the scale section, and that will give us the actual scaling to that as to what we have before. So it's very important. So if you're scaling the diffuse, you need to also scale the bump since they are the same texture. So I'll scale this and plug this back into the diffuse. So once I'm done with this, so I think I will work with the bump map that I have there. So I'll just use that in the displacement channel. So I'll drag this here and make this being the displacement. So we'll just come in and bring in displacements. So because this is a grayscale value, I'm going to enable gamma override and give it 2.2. So also I'm going to put the same scale here because they are the same. Then this is going to be plugged into this guy, to the texture map here. Then we'll bring the texture map to the output section into the displacement. So at this point, you don't see anything yet. What you need to do is you need to add this tag, Redshift tag, object tag. And once you add the Redshift object tag, you need to go over to the geometry, then override, then go to the displacement. You want to override that displacement. So you start seeing displacement here. So if we bring this maximum displacement to, let me just go very drastic. And also here, you should start see displacement on this geometry. So you can see when we didn't have anything. See here. It's just subtle. So I think that 5 actually is too much. So we'll try and work with 2, 2. All right. So, and once you're done with this, that's it. So normally when I started texturing, I will just stop here. I will call this done. That okay, I'm done with this displacement, this texture, fine, fabric texture, and this is good. But because you want to reach to realism, yeah, correct, realism, you need to also make sure that texture in real life are not perfect. So you need to add a bit of imperfection to this texture. So imperfection could come in different ways depending on the texture or the material you want that to be. In this case, that is fabric. It could be in form of tears, in form of wearing out, use, and all that. So for this fabric, in this case, I want to try and create an illusion when light hits your object, the edges around this object should kind of wash away because of the impact of the light. And also I'm going to add a little bit of use wearing out to it, to some various parts of this, making use of maps also. So I'm going to show you what I'm trying to say in essence. So I'm going to bring in Fresnel. Fresnel is what I'm going to use to do that. So Redshift has some Fresnel, so I'm going to bring in Fresnel. This is what I'm going to use to mask this effect that I'm about to do. So once I bring the Fresnel, another thing I'm going to do is to duplicate this texture itself. So if I control drag this, I have that. So I'm still going to plug this into this section. So I need to mix these two guys together and using this Fresnel to now be the layer mask, if you understand what I'm trying to say. So what I'm going to use in this case is to use a mix material. So I'm going to use vector mix. All right, so if you look at the vector mix, we have 3 inputs here. So I think I'll just zoom in so you see. So we have 3 inputs. We have the input 1, input 2, and the mix input. So the mix input is the amount you are going to use to mix, which is what we're going to use with this Fresnel. So if we go to the Fresnel, for instance, and you see your Fresnel value, index of refraction, so you could just change this, and also your extinction coefficient. So I think we'll go with this default. Let's just stay with the default value. Then we'll go back and start working on the curve fallout. So if we bring this over to the input mix amount and drag this to the input, this is what we're going to have. So we can start to change some values around here. So if we come here and bring this down to 0, see what we have. If we take this up, so we will not really see any effect until we start to add some value. So I think I'll just work with color user data. So to explain this for you. So if I bring this color user data, I'm going to have 2 different colors. So I'll make this red and make this green. So this is now dependent on you, which one you want to make the base color and which. So I think I'll make red the base, the input 1, and then the green, the input 2. So what that means is that every time you see this light, you have that green color coming through. So now the effect will now be dependent on some of this value that you change. So if you, for instance, let's bring this to 0, you notice you don't get to have any change. And the reason is because you need to first off go over to your IOR and change some values there. You can also change your facing color. So if we bring this up, for instance, you see the change. So the green is mixing more with it. So if you look this, just put the idea of reflection, reflectivity. The higher the value, the more reflective it tends to have, and the more how do I put it? The more reflective the environment is on that. So don't forget the input 2 is what is working as a reflective object when the light hits it. This is more of the environmental object, while the object 1 is the base object. So if you increase the reflectivity, index of reflectivity, that means you are saying you want more of the environment to show through, which is why you're having this. So if I bring this to 0.5, see what is happening. So you can just use this to change whatever you want, and that will give you. So if we bring this up here, so we can tend to say, okay, we want to have all these effects here. All right, so I think I like this. So as the light hits this object around, I'm going to be having all this. So once I'm done with this, I can now start changing and working on this. So this is going to be my base. So it's going to be my input 1. So we'll drag this to the input 1 section. We'll bring this down. Then we have the mix. Input 1 should be down, input 2. So this is going to be my input 2. So before I start working with the input 2, I need to change the color. I need to change this color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the color correction to this same material here. So we have color correct and put this into the input section. So don't worry, this looks so rough. We'll just arrange this later. So bring these are the main. So this is what we're going to use to color correct that. So for the color correction, I'm going to plug this directly into the input section. So we can start working on this. So for the gamma, if we bring the gamma up, it starts to add white to this and make it whiter and whiter until you have this. So we want to have the effect of this environment with it. So we are going to make it a little bit more than the initial value or the base value, which is 1. So if we try 1.5, I think that's too much. 1.2, 2, 5. Okay, so let's see between 1 and 1. Let's try 3.5. So we want to really push this, even though you need to be subtle with this. So you can also work with your contrast. So if you like, maybe you want to do some decoloration. So you might decide to do your hue shift, or you want to do some colorization to this. You can just change the color. Maybe it was washed with a bad detergent, and then which colorize this. Then you can also work with your saturation. Maybe you want to desaturate this a little bit. So this is the effect you get to have. So let's assume we are stopping here, somewhere here. So we need to now mix this guy. We need to mix this with this initial base color. All right. So even though I know this is too much, so we'll always go back and change that. So what we'll do is we'll bring this to the input 2. Okay. So this is the input 2 and the. All right. So this is the base, which is the input 1. This is the input 2, the color corrected one, and you have your layer masks. So bring this over here. You get to have this effect. So you can start to see this beautiful effect where it shows that light is hitting this, and even though I pushed mine too far, you could just work with yours and reduce and make sure you don't get too much with it. So if we try 1.15, it's a little bit close to it. So if you see a little bit close to it, and also because we have the colorization and changing of hue of this, you get to have this effect that you 1. So let's change this color shift to the default. And maybe bring this up a little bit. So that solves this part. So let's say we still want to break some parts. Maybe you have some dirt here that colorizes this with this same effect. Then that is when we are going to mix this guy here. We mix it with another. Oh, sorry, we are going to mix the Fresnel. Sorry, we're going to mix this Fresnel. Let me delete this color. We're going to mix the Fresnel with um, another map. So this, we're going to work with this map that I downloaded from MoGraph Plus. So you can just check some of this tutorial out. So I need to mix these guys together and then plug that into the max layer. So if we go to the mix, so we have two mix. We have the vector mix and the normal mix. So the vector mix, the reason why I chose vector mix here is because we're working with geometry. So this is going to be placed on geometry. But then, because these are meant to be, I want to mix this guy and assume they are just normal texture map. So I'm going to use normal scalar mix. So we would do this, or we could even use add. We could actually use add in my case. So we could use add, but then let's see the effect of this mix under my diffuse. So we have only this, and this gives us that. If we check only this here, so this is what we are having. So we need to look for a way to mix this guy together. So if we select this, coming, checking this, if I bring this 2.2, I need to look for a way to, so let me invert this. I think if mix does not work, I think add should work for me. So we'll come to this place and add both of them together and then plug this in. All right, so this is fine. So we're having that bit of this. So now this is where the thing now comes here. Anywhere you have whites, the object will show through. You are going to max that. And anywhere you have black, you will not show through. So that means you are going to have more of this color corrected with this effect if you're looking at this. So we need to look for a way to reduce the white. Everywhere I have this white, I want to turn them to black, and all this black should be turned to white. So what I would do is I'm going to add a ramp node and then use that ramp node to change this effect. So if we bring this over to the inputs 2, so I'm going to delete this mix. We're not using that anymore. So now for the ramp, I'm going to change this to alt and invert. So this changes. And then we are going to push more black than white. Okay, so we just want subtle changes in this. So maybe we're going to still go in. Want too much. So let's try 98. 98.5. We just really want to push that. So I think we could still come here and push this guy in. Okay, so we could just work with the gamma to reduce the whites that we're going to be having. So if we have one, that is this, if we bring this down, so we have a little, just less white here. So once you are fine with this, then you can now plug that into the mix. Then if we bring this here, this is what we're going to have. So you just have a little bit of all these hints here, somewhere here, even though it's not really showing, but this shows, bring a little bit of realism to this. If you come and look down somewhere here, see this whitish part poking through. And that's how you can do that texture, how you can work with it. So now that you are done with this, the next thing is for you to now start changing your texture to a different texture that you want. So I'm going to quickly work with this setup, and all I just do is just change this texture and let's see the effects. So I'm going to fast forward this while I'm changing texture. Then by the time I'm adding a new thing to this, you're going to see what I'm going to have. Or I could just, maybe I would just duplicate this and work on this other one. So I could always come back to this initial one. So I'm going to select this and I'll just start working and get back here. All right. Okay. All right, so we're here. So you notice in this texture, we need to go back and change this value. So in the case of this texture, we need to still bring this a lot larger than we have it. So we have this. Then because of the kind of texture that this is, there is another map that we could add to this. So I'm just going to show you how you can make use of these other maps here. So if you look at this, this map has ambient occlusion map and also opacity map. Then we don't really need the roughness, we don't need. So I'm going to show you how to make use of these two maps in Redshift. So let's work with the opacity first. So that's very simple. So we just, once we bring the opacity, we are going to apply that to the scale as usual. So opacity is just merely you changing this and plugging it into the opacity section of your texture. And that will add a bit of cuts, more like your alpha in normal traditional Redshift. So my system is slowing down, so let's just wait for that. All right, so it's back. So I'm going to drag this and put this into the opacity section. So this should be here. So we'll drag this here under overall, you have your opacity color. So you change that. Then it starts to break up everywhere you, so it pushes that more. So you see more of that opacity. So if you are to bring this into an alpha, all this black, uh, if you add light into this, there you're going to see them. So that's for that opacity. So the other thing is the, what's it called? The ambient occlusion. So I'm going to drag the ambient occlusion here. And this ambient occlusion is just a simple thing of adding it into my diffuse weight. Yeah, that's what I'm going to add that. So if I bring this to the diffuse weight and add the ambient occlusion, it's going to add the normal AO to that section. And it darkens some parts that needs to be darkened to give you more realistic effect that you're looking for. So don't forget, I need to still bring this over up to the scale. So I need to scale this up. So drag this over here, scale, and that's all it's like. So I'm going to do a high resolution render for these two um, maps, these two textures, and show you the effects, and then we'll be done with that. So just hold on for me. Okay, so you can see what we have. I had to wait to do some renders. So you see what I have right here. Okay, so then another render. So in this case, I did a different one. I noticed that the texture was kind of too big in my own eye, so I did a smaller texture of that to do this. Then I went further with this to inscribe, imprint rather, my logo here. So it's just the same principle I used to do all this stuff here. That's what I did to do this. So this is how to do this fabric. So if you feel this was helpful, please do give me a like and thumbs up because it helps me. And if you are new to my channel, please do subscribe because I do tutorials like this every time. Should have a wonderful day and God bless you. Bye.